Well, I think like everyone else, we think we should have a better year this year than we had last year. And even though we ended up in second place and we got to the CCHA playoff championship game, we still think, we can go a little better, a little higher, and be a little more consistent in small areas. And then we've got to answer some questions too about this year's team. So I'm sure we'll be discussing that. But we're always shooting for the top of the league. And as you've been mentioning, it's the last year in the CCHA, and I'm sure everybody wants to finish it off well.
What are some of the question marks in your mind?
Well, I think we lost all our captains, and we had all four captains were seniors: Luke Glendenning, Greg Pattern, David Wahlberg, and Sean Hunwick, and those were all key players. They played big roles on our team, and the leadership they provided, and so on. So I think like every team, you've got new leadership, that'll be a question. New goalies, that'll be a question. And then you start looking around. We lost Chris Brown, who would have been one of our top goal scorers this year. He signed early. So we're looking at our team, who's going to score the goals, how's our power play going to be, and so on. So the usual questions, but this is the first year we've had a big question about our goalie.
Well, and that's, I know with Hunwick gone, how do you see, that shaping up? Freshman Jarrett Rutledge is on campus. How do you see your goaltending situation shaping up?
Well, we recruited Rutledge to be our starter, and he came from the U.S. development program, and I expect him to be our starter, but he's had some adjustments with his contacts in the early going, so he's not ready to take shots yet. We're looking at Steve Racine, another newcomer, along with Adam Janicek. And so Janny played in a couple of games last year behind Hunwick, and he's got some experience, and he has a chance. He's a junior, and certainly Racine has got more experience than any of them. He's an older freshman. So we'll see how that shakes out. This will be the first year we've carried four goalies, and Luke Dwyer is our fourth goalie. I'll mention his name because I don't think I mentioned Hunwick's name for the first 3 years he was here. So now I've mentioned his name, and we'll see what happens.
Well, you talked about some of the firepower that you lost up front, but you do have 7 of your top 10 scorers back, including sophomore Alex Guptill was the last year's Rookie of the Year. What does he do so well, and what do you expect maybe make a jump this season?
Well, this time of year, last year, if you asked me about and if we had any impact freshmen, and I did not mention Guptill because I didn't think he would make an impact. Guptill was coming off a very lackluster 2 years of junior hockey he was injury plagued and so on, and I didn't think he was ready for this. But he had about 7 goals around Christmas, and then we changed lines, and he ended up leading our team in goals. So what did he do? He had a nose for the net. He made the adjustment to Division I hockey and the work ethic that went with it, and then he showed that he had some talent, and so he was a pleasant surprise last year. Di Giuseppe, we knew would come in and play well, and he did. He was maybe our best freshman the first half. And then Guptill took over the second half. But I expect both these guys to be key players on our team this year.
And you talked about maybe some of that the leadership that has graduated and moved on. A.J. Treyas is back as a senior. Is that a guy that you're looking to step in? He had a pretty big season offensively last year. What's he bring to the team on and off the ice?
Well, he's a classic student athlete. He's a pre-med student, and he's the kind of kid that you'd like to have over for dinner. He's quiet, he's polite, he's respectful, and then he gets on the ice and he's a dynamite little player. Very good offensively and very good defensively. So he's one of those unsung players that slips between the cracks, but you love him as a coach. So he'll be a key player on the ice, and he'll set a good example for our young players off the ice. But his other support staff in terms of captains, assistant captains, Lee Moffey, a little more outspoken, a little more gregarious as a leader, and he's a senior defenseman who led our defenseman in scoring last year. and deserves to be a captain. And then Mac Bennett is a junior, but a dynamite player, dynamite kid, and his teammates elected him to be an assistant captain as well. So I think he'll be a good balance between Trias and Mafi.
Matt Slovin of the Michigan Daily asks, does junior defenseman John Merrill seem like a different player in person than he was at this time last year?
Well, he didn't get to play last year in the first half, so he didn't get to play until the second half of the year. But I can tell you that he looks very good in the early going. We've only been on the ice a handful of times as coaches, but Merrill looks good. He should look good. He's a junior. He was a high draft pick, and he's a tremendous talent. So we'll be leaning on him as being one of our top 4 all year.
What are your early impressions of freshman defenseman Jacob Trouba?
Trouba looks like an impact defenseman, if you can have such a thing. He just looks ready for Division I hockey, and he was a high-profile kid coming out of the development program, high-profile coming out of the NHL draft, drafted 9th overall by Winnipeg, and nothing phases him. He just shows up and works hard and plays his game, and he looks like a real one of those defensemen, a real impact player.
George Sipple from the Free Press asked if he thought, he wanted me to ask you if you thought that Notre Dame would be the team to beat this year.
Well, good question. I think there's a handful of teams that are the team to beat, and like last year, I don't think anybody on this call thought Ferris State would win our league, but they did, and they deserved to. And it might have been a bit of a surprise to some of us, but maybe not to them. And I think this year we've got a handful of teams that could win it and not surprise anyone, and Notre Dame would be one of those teams. And then there's a handful of teams that could win it and be a surprise team, like Ferris State. So that's what you get every year in this league, and that's why the league is so competitive.
George follows up with, he'd like to know what your favorite CCHA moment is.
Oh, boy. You don't have time, George.
You've got a lot to draw on, Coach.
Yeah. We've had a lot of great moments, and a lot of them here at Yost, but we've had good moments on the road, too, and good moments at Joe Louis Arena, and it's pretty tough to nail it down to one. I'll have to think about that, but it's a good question.
From Paula Weston at USCHO, what's the final season of CCHA mean to you and your program?
Well, it's interesting. I came back 28 or 29 years ago, but I had played here when Michigan was in the WCHA. So when I came back as a coach, I'd never really heard. I'd heard of the CCHA, and I knew it was a league, but I hadn't heard of some of the teams in the league. I had no idea what to expect, and the first thing I found out was that a team from our league had won the NCAA championship that year, and that was Bowling Green. And as I got into the league, I realized how good these teams were, how good the coaching was, and how competitive the overall conference was. And I gained a lot of respect for the CCHA. And, we've heard talk about Michigan and Michigan State having a great impact in this league, and that's true. But I remember when Lake Superior was as good as anybody in the league. Miami has emerged as one of the top programs. Notre Dame has rebounded to be one of the top programs. Western Michigan now is one of the top programs. Ferris State was in the championship game last year, and so on. I think this league has come a long way. I've got a lot of respect for it. On the other hand, it's disappointing. It'll be the last year. I'm disappointed the way the cards fell and the way everyone left the league so quickly. And that's the way it is. So I guess a lot of teams will have one foot out of the door and one foot in the door this last year.